Now it's time for us to learn a little bit more about variables. What we're going to do is modify our player so that we don't have to go into the code and change things when we want to modify how long the player can jump or even how fast the player moves. We're going to make some variables that are these fields that we talked about, but we're going to make them available to us at runtime in the inspector. It might sound like a lot, it might sound simple. Don't worry, it is simple. Let's start by opening up our player script. This time I'll double click on our player. Actually, I'm going to stop playing first. Make sure I'm not in play mode. Double click on our player and I'm going to find our jump code. So right here where we do the jump, we set our jump velocity to 5, or we set our vertical velocity to 5, which is our how high we are how fast we want to jump. And by the way, if you're wondering what that 5 is, that 5 actually represents meters per second. So we're jumping up at 5 meters per second. Imagine that the game is scaled to 1 meter units. So each block that we move over is 1 meter, and we're going to jump up 5 of those per second. That's what that is. So we need to make this variable so that we can adjust this without having to come into the code and change it over and over. Same with this maximum jump time. We had to go in and change this by putting a 0.5 instead of a 1. Let's say I want that to be variable as well. Well, to do that, we're going to create a new field. I'm going to delete my 5 here. So I've got my cursor right at the beginning of the 5. I'll hit delete. We're going to create a new field, and I'm going to call this jump velocity. Since it's going to be a member field that's going to be stored up at the top like this, I'm going to put my underscore there. Again, this is more of a syntax that I just prefer. It's not required. You don't have to have an underscore there. Sometimes you'll see an underscore, sometimes you'll see an M with an underscore on some really old stuff, and sometimes you'll see absolutely nothing indicating it. I just like to have something there indicating it, that it's not part of this member or this method here. It's not a variable like this horizontal. It's something that's stored at the class level. I'm going to give this the name underscore jump velocity. There we go, velocity, and then I'll hit Alt-Enter, and I'm going to generate a field for it, just like I did before. Now, one cool trick that I can use is hitting F12 on my keyboard to go right up to that definition. F12 is the go to definition hotkey, and it'll take you right to wherever the thing is defined. So here I have my jump velocity, but it's not set to anything. It's not set to that 5. And right now, if I save, it's not modifiable in the editor and the inspector. What I need to do is take this private keyword. I'm just going to double click on it. Or actually, let's go to the front of it. We'll just left click it right at the front. And we'll add a square brace. This is the key right next to P on my keyboard. And we're going to add the word serialize field. And then a closing brace, the key right next to that other one. Now make sure that you've spelled it right. There's no D. It's not serialized. It's serialize field. And then there should be the braces around it. It should light up. You can hit save with Control S. Go back into Unity. And now you should see a jump velocity on your player. If you don't see that, make sure that you've selected the alien. Don't be on the grass or the light or something. Go to the alien, go find your player script. If it's collapsed like this, expand it out, and then find the jump velocity. Also, if you have too many things expanded, it could be way down at the bottom. Just collapse the other stuff. So we've got a jump velocity right now that is a 0. So the default value right now is 0. And I don't like that. So let's go back to our player script and give it a better default. We had a value of 5 before. So right at the end of jump velocity before the semicolon, we'll add an equals and we'll put in a 5 here. By the way, the semicolon is always the indicator for the end of a line or a command. We don't have it when we have braces, so you're not going to see a semicolon at the end of a brace, but you do see it at the end of every variable definition and at the end of every line that's executed. Again, not at the end of a method with the braces, but at the end of everything else pretty much. Let's save, and often if you see an error like this, let's say I delete that, this little expected semicolon, like if I put my mouse over it, you'll see it says CS 1002 semicolon expected. Ignore the part above it, the read-only struct part. You don't need that. That part's a little confusing, but it's telling you right there it needs a semicolon. So let's go add a semicolon, save again, and it should work. We should now have a default value of 5 showing up here, unless we've modified that value already. Let's see, did it show up? Oh no, it didn't actually show up. That's okay. So if it doesn't show our default, we can right click and we can choose reset. That'll reset to the default. Now you don't want to do that later on once you've set up a whole bunch of stuff because it's going to reset everything to defaults. But right now there's really nothing on there except for our jump velocity. So let's play and see how this works. I'll hit the play button. I haven't saved, but that's okay. I probably should have, but it'll be fine as long as I don't crash. I should be able to jump. There we go. And I jump to about halfway up my screen. Let's change this jump velocity to 10. So I jump 10 meters per second instead. And then I'll jump, and look at that. I now jump way above my screen. Let's change it down to 1. And you can see that I have a very slow, very small jump. Now, I like the value of 5 for now, so I think I'm going to go back to 5 and just leave it at that. But we now have the ability to modify it completely. Let's continue on and make it so that we can modify the jump duration as well. We'll go back to the player script, and just like we did the jump velocity, we're going to do the same kind of thing for our jump duration. We have this 0.5, and we're going to need to figure out a way to make a variable that controls how long this player can jump. In fact, what I'd like to do now is present that to you as a mini challenge. Don't worry if you get lost. I'll show you how to do it in a moment, but my goal for you is that you go through this process and create a jump duration variable. See if you can create it yourself, and then continue on, and I'll show you the process to do it in case you got lost or had any problems or questions. So go ahead and give that a try now. All right, it's solution time. Let's change this 0.5 and put in a variable. Hopefully you found a way to do this by just putting underscore jump duration or something similar, and then hitting Alt-Enter and generating a field. Then I hit F12 to go to that field, hit Home to go to the beginning of the row there, and then put in my square brace and do Serialize Field. There we go. I'll save with Control S. Oh, and let's give it a default time. Right now I have it at 0.5 seconds, so I'm going to add in a 0.5 F right there. We'll save one more time, minimize the code editor, and jump back into Unity, and I should now see a 0.5 value and my jump velocity. There we go. I've got a jump duration and a jump velocity. Let's try jumping and see if it actually works. So you jump, and I go about half the way up. Let's change that jump duration to 0.25. Try jumping, and yep, I jump quite a bit shorter, and if I change it up to 1, I can jump for a very long time. All right, I now have 2 variables that I can modify and see how I like things and get them to the levels that I want them at. There are a lot of different ways that you can use these, and we'll be talking about them and using them in different ways in the future. But just remember that if you want to make a field modifiable, you want to have a variable that you can modify in the inspector, the key thing you need to use is this serialized field attribute. There is one other way to do it. There is an alternative way to do it, which is to make this public instead of private. We'll talk about what that means later, but it's not the way that I would recommend doing it. You can replace this right here with the word public, save, and it's going to work exactly the same. Everything will work. You'll have no problems, except that this jump velocity could get messed up later. And I'll talk about how that happens in a later lesson because it's a slightly more advanced topic. For now, I'm going to hit Control Z, save, and then go back into Plastic and commit my changes. So we've added 2 variables, a jump velocity and a jump duration variable. So we'll say added jump velocity and duration variables to the player and commit or check in.